Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Just close them. I want you to think about a time when you were completely alone. Not the kind of alone where you're sitting by yourself in a coffee shop. Not the kind of alone where your friends are just a phone call away. I mean the kind of alone where it's 2 a.m. and the silence in the room is so loud. It's deafening. The kind of alone where you scroll through your contacts and you realize there is not a single person you can call. Not because nobody loves you, but because you don't even know how to explain what you're feeling. Because the pain is so deep, the confusion is so thick, the doubt is so heavy, that words don't exist for it yet. Have you been there? Keep your eyes closed. Now I want you to remember what you told yourself in that moment. Because I know what most of you said. You said, something is wrong with me. You said, why am I always the one left behind? You said, maybe I'm just not meant for great things. You said, maybe this loneliness is my punishment. Now open your eyes. Because I am here today to tell you that everything you believed in that dark, silent, 2 a.m. moment was a lie. That loneliness was not your punishment. That loneliness was your preparation. Ladies and gentlemen, my name doesn't matter today. What matters is what I'm about to say to you. What matters is that somewhere in this room, someone came here carrying something so heavy, they almost didn't walk through that door. Someone in this room almost gave up this week. Someone in this room is smiling on the outside and absolutely shattered on the inside. And I came here for that person. I came here for you because someone once came for me and it changed everything. Let me tell you a story. And I want you to listen carefully because this story is not just about one girl from a small town in India. This story is about every single person who was ever told they were too much, too ambitious, too different, too loud, too soft, too foreign, too ordinary, too extraordinary for their own good. This is a story about a girl who was pulled out of her homeland as a teenager, dropped into a foreign country, bullied so severely for the color of her skin, the sound of her name, the shape of her nose, that she packed her bags and went home. Defeated, humiliated, alone. This is the story of Priyanka Chopra. But more than that, this is your story. Because I promise you, if you look closely enough, you'll see yourself in every chapter. Priyanka was born in Jamshedpur, India. Her parents were doctors in the Indian Army, which means she grew up moving. Every few years, a new city, a new school, a new set of strangers who would either accept you or reject you. And as a child, she learned something that most of us spend decades trying to unlearn. She learned that you cannot depend on the continuity of other people. Friendships end. Environments change. The only constant is you. Now most people hear a childhood like that and they think, oh, that must have been so hard. And yes, it was hard. Of course it was hard. Imagine being 12 years old and starting over. Again, imagine building your little world of friends and routines and comfort, and then watching it disappear in a moving truck. Imagine doing that not once, not twice, but over and over and over again. But here is what nobody tells you about that kind of life. It builds something in you. It builds a muscle that most people never even knew existed. The muscle of self-reliance. The muscle of reinvention. The muscle of finding yourself interesting enough company when there is nobody else around. Because when you are constantly the new girl, when you are constantly the outsider looking in, you stop waiting for the world to make space for you. And you start making space for yourself. Priyanka didn't know it at the time. Nobody does while they're living it. You never think, oh, this suffering is going to serve me later. You just survive. You put one foot in front of the other. You cry in the bathroom so nobody sees. You laugh louder than everyone else so nobody suspects. And you keep moving. She was 13 when her parents sent her to the United States to live with relatives. And that's when things got truly dark. She walked into an American high school with a thick Indian accent, brown skin, and a name that most of her classmates had never heard before. And they were not kind. Children are not always kind. People are not always kind. She was called names. She was mocked. She was made to feel like she was less than, like she was somehow wrong for existing the way she existed. And here is the moment I want you to sit with. Here is the moment that could have broken everything. She could have stayed. She could have toughened up in the way that people mean when they say toughen up. The way that means stop feeling. The way that means become someone else. Shrink yourself down until you fit. Sand off all your edges until you are smooth and palatable and acceptable. She could have done that. But she didn't. She went home. And I know that some people look at that and call it retreat, call it weakness, call it giving up. But I want to offer you a different interpretation, because I think going home in that moment was one of the bravest things she ever did. Because she chose herself. She chose her dignity over belonging. She chose the discomfort of truth over the comfort of assimilation. She said, essentially, I would rather be alone in my truth than surrounded by people who require me to be a lie. Say that again to yourself. I would rather be alone in my truth than surrounded by people who require me to be a lie. How many of you are currently surrounded by people who require you to be a lie? How many of you are performing every single day? Performing happiness, performing confidence, performing success, performing fine. Because the people around you cannot handle the real version of you. Because the real version of you is too complicated, too messy, too ambitious, too broken, too real. And so you shrink, and so you simplify, and so you spend years and years and years being a reduced, edited, sanitized version of yourself for the comfort of people who were never even worth that sacrifice. I need you to hear this. The loneliness you feel when you are with the wrong people is 1,000 times more damaging than the loneliness you feel when you are by yourself. At least when you're alone, you can hear your own thoughts. At least when you're alone, you can figure out who you actually are. At least when you're alone, there is a chance, a real fighting chance that you will meet yourself. Maybe for the very first time. Priyanka went home to India. And instead of hiding in shame, she rebuilt. Her mother enrolled her in a computer science and engineering program. She was going to become an engineer. That was the plan. That was the safe, sensible, socially acceptable plan. But life had other ideas. At 16, she entered a beauty pageant almost on a whim. Her brother submitted her name. And she went along with it, probably thinking it was just something to do. Just a distraction from the weight of everything that had happened. She won. Not just the local pageant, not just the regional one. She won Femina Miss India. And then she went to the Miss World pageant in 2000. And she won that too. At 18 years old, Priyanka Chopra became Miss World. Now let me stop here, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, so she got beautiful and won a pageant. That's not exactly relatable. And I hear you. I understand that reaction, but I need you to look deeper, because the pageant is not the point. The transformation is the point. Because less than 2 years before she stood on that stage in a crown, she was a teenage girl crying in an American bathroom, being called names, being made to feel like her existence was an inconvenience. She was a girl who had packed her bags in defeat. A girl who had said, in essence, this world does not want me. And 2 years later, she was standing on a world stage, being called the most beautiful woman on the planet. What changed? Did the world change? No, the world never changes first. The world responds, the world reacts, the world follows. She changed. She went inward when the outside world rejected her. She went home. She went quiet. She went still. And in that stillness, she found something that no bully, no beauty standard, no foreign classroom could take from her. She found her own sense of worth that was not dependent on anyone else's approval. That is the secret. That is the thing that nobody puts in a self-help book because it sounds too simple. It sounds too painful. Because the secret is this: the most powerful thing you will ever do for yourself is learn to be alone without being lonely. Those are two very different things. Being alone is a physical state. Being lonely is an emotional state. And you can be in a crowd of 10,000 people and be the loneliest person in the room. And you can be sitting by yourself on a hillside at sunset and feel more connected, more whole, more alive than you have ever felt in your life. The question is not whether you are alone. The question is what you are building in that aloneness. Because every great human being who has ever changed the world, every artist, every leader, every revolutionary, every person who made history and cracked the surface of the ordinary and showed us what is possible, every single one of them had a chapter of aloneness, a chapter of isolation, a chapter where the world did not see them, a chapter where they were dismissed, overlooked, underestimated, or left behind. And in that chapter, they built themselves. They built themselves so strong, so deep, so real, that when the world finally turned to look at them, there was simply no ignoring what was there. Priyanka entered Bollywood. And it was not easy. It was never easy. Because nothing worth having is ever easy. And the sooner you stop waiting for easy, the sooner you can start building extraordinary. She came into an industry that was deeply political, deeply hierarchical, deeply controlled by established families and networks and dynasties. She was an outsider. Again, she was the girl from the army family who had won a pageant. In the eyes of many people in that world, she was not supposed to last. But she worked. Oh, she worked. She took roles that challenged her. She pushed boundaries. She refused to be put in a box. And gradually, slowly, painfully, one film at a time, she built a reputation, not just for her beauty, which she had, not just for her presence, which she had, but for her hunger, her relentlessness, her absolute refusal to be anyone other than herself. She played villains. She played victims. She played lovers and fighters and daughters and queens. She sang. She danced. She did stunts. She learned languages. She showed up and showed up and showed up. Even when the reviews were bad and the box office numbers were disappointing and the critics were unkind. Because here is something I need you to understand about people who achieve lasting greatness. They are not fueled by applause. They are fueled by purpose. Applause is beautiful. Applause feels amazing. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that recognition doesn't matter. Because that would be a lie. It matters. It feels good to be seen. It feels good to be celebrated. We are human beings. We are wired for connection and validation. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be appreciated. But here is the danger. If applause is your fuel, you will run out. Because applause is unpredictable. Applause comes and goes. The same crowd that is cheering for you tonight will be criticizing you tomorrow. The same people who called you a genius last year will call you overrated next year. The same fans who lined up to meet you will forget your name when someone new and shiny comes along. If you build your identity on the applause of others, you will spend your entire life in a state of anxiety. Always performing, always monitoring, always adjusting yourself to maintain the approval. Always terrified of the silence that comes when the applause stops. But if you are fueled by purpose, if you know why you are doing what you are doing, if the driving force behind your work is something deeper than what other people think of you, then you become unshakable. You become someone that circumstances cannot destroy. You become someone who can fail publicly and get back up. You become someone who can be dismissed and keep going. You become someone whose fire is internal and therefore immune to the external weather. Priyanka built that kind of fire, and then she did something that almost nobody expected. She went to America. Again, the same country that had humiliated her as a teenager. The same country that had told her, through the mouths of cruel children, that she didn't belong. The same country that had made her pack her bags and go home in tears. She went back. And she didn't go back to hide. She didn't go back to assimilate. She didn't go back to sand off her edges and become palatable. She went back as herself fully, completely, unapologetically herself. She auditioned for American television. She was already the biggest female star in Bollywood. She was already a global music artist. She was already an established businesswoman and producer. By any reasonable standard, she had nothing left to prove. But Priyanka Chopra is not a person who does things by reasonable standards. She auditioned for a show called Quantico, And she didn't just get the role, she got the lead. She became the first South Asian woman to lead an American network drama series. She was on the cover of Time magazine. She was at the Met Gala. She was in Hollywood films alongside the biggest stars in the world. The girl who was told she didn't belong became someone the world could not ignore. But I need to tell you something about that journey, because I don't want you to hear this as a fairy tale. I don't want you to hear this as some kind of smooth, inevitable ascent from point A to point B. Because that's not what it was. That's never what it is. The narrative we tell about successful people is always so clean in retrospect. We smooth out the wrinkles. We skip the 3 a.m. crying. We fast forward through the years of grinding and doubting and questioning and almost quitting. I refuse to do that to you today. Because